at this stage describe the Turkish relations with Russia?
It is not at the desirable level, of course, because of many things, but mainly because of the downing of the Russian plane in Syria. This has made Turkish-Russian relations difficult at a time when we need it very much, especially, among other things at least, for Crimean and in general Ukrainian crisis, because there Turkey could have played a more positive role with the Russians on the Ukrainian crisis. Now that this happened, the downing of the plane happened, the relations are very strained, so I don't think that Turkey has any leverage at this stage on Russians.
But if you look from Ukraine, there would be people who would say, especially, for instance, Crimean Tatars, who would say, who expected probably a bigger involvement from Turkey, especially in case of Crimea, regarding the relations of Crimean Tatars and Turkey and historical relations.
Actually, there, Turkey and Ukraine had already started a cooperation and a set of negotiations regarding the future of the restoring some of the rights, at least, of the Crimean Tatar who were expelled from their house. As you may remember, when they came back from Central Asian countries, they found that their homes were occupied by other people, and Turkey and Ukraine were about to find a solution to this problem, at least to the extent possible, if they can prove that a given house or given land belongs to that Tatar person. So the Ukrainian authorities were going to find a way either to compensate or to return the house as it is in kind. So now with the annexation of Crimea, these hopes has fallen down, collapsed, and it's a pity.
But what will you say to those who probably say that as a NATO member, as you know, regarding this support for the Crimean Tatars, Turkey probably could be a big advocate?
I think Turkey is still a big advocate, but the downing of the plane now made any negotiations with Russia in the present juncture more difficult.
You said about the downing the plane, but that's one of the things. There are some different kind of the actions, from banning the some part of flights. There are the issues with the trade. So what would be what to your idea would be the Turkish response?
Actually, Turkey shouldn't have downed the plane, in my opinion. Yes, Russian plane violated Turkish airspace, but each time an airspace is violated, you don't down the plane. There are other ways of doing it. This act of downing lost Turkey's leverage on Russia, because now Russia has cut all relations and took measures, retaliative measures against Turkey. And under these circumstances, neither the question of the Crimean Tatar nor other subjects is being discussed between Turkey and Russia.
Do you see a Russian campaign in Syria, the latest involvement, as a success, as it often portrays?
If you are referring to the withdrawal, partial withdrawal, actually it is up to Russians. Nobody understands what is in the mind of Putin when he decided to withdraw, or partially at least, from Syria. it may mean a message to the Syrian authorities that Bashar al-Assad should not be so adamant or too stubborn in making concessions. And also, since it's only partial withdrawal, the major part of Russian military presence is still there. And in addition to the Tartus naval bases in Syria, they obtained another airport bases very close to Lataki, Crimean bases. So they are better established now. Russia is better established in Syria than it was before the crisis. And Turkey's downing of the plane played a role to facilitate Russia's settling down more heavily militarily in Syria. So if they are withdrawing now, this partial withdrawal does not mean a weakening of Russian positions in Syria.
Bearing in mind the whole context of the conflict in Syria, you know, all the damage which has been done, casualties and victims, at this stage, what could be still the first possible solutions? I'm not speaking about the solution because it's so broad, but at this stage.
I think the Geneva process has to be given a chance to further continue, because after the start of the first round of the Geneva talks, there was a relative lessening in the clashes. It was not an unviolated ceasefire. The ceasefire was violated from time to time, but it gave a chance to the parties to think once more and to see perhaps the advantages of the ceasefire. It is not holding everywhere, but generally it was a good start. I think this initiative has to be given a chance to work.
But if,
a negotiated solution.
If you speak about the Geneva process, so what is this maximum Geneva can reach? Because, you know, Geneva, it's also should be a humble
yes, of course.
expectation.
Geneva process was composed of several stages. The first one was ceasefire, and then the parties were going to talk to each other and start a democratization process, change certain laws, agree on a framework, and go to the elections. There are several stages. So the first one was the ceasefire and resumption of the talks. Ceasefire is achieved at a relative level. It is not an entirely satisfactory ceasefire, but it was working to a certain extent, and the parties were happy with it. Actually, the ceasefire did not cover, as you may remember, the terrorist organizations, neither the ISIS nor some other terrorist organizations such as Jabhat al-Nusra and the others. So these terrorist organizations were still subject to be attacked by the coalition forces and by Russia. So this is underway at present, and perhaps this initiative has to be given a chance.
And in that case, if we speak, for instance, to audience in Ukraine, which really sometimes is so confused about what's happening, in that regard, who would govern Syria?
Well,
are we speaking about the partial partition?
At present, Syria is governed to the extent possible by Bashar al-Assad, and the coalition and international community at large seems to have agreed that the transitional period also will be taken care of by Bashar al-Assad. What is not known, perhaps this is the heart of your question, what will happen after the transition period is over? According to the UN Security Council decision 2254, the future of Syria was going to be decided by Syrians. So when the democratization or transition period is over, it has to be left to the Syrians to decide whomever they want to govern their country. This is the text of the UN Security Council decision, resolution 2254.
Speaking about the refugee crisis, there was the expectation and one of the solutions which Brussels proposed, it's really having and supporting Syrian refugees on Turkish territory. How do you see that? And
actually, Turkey adopted the foreign doors policy towards the Syrian refugees, and it says that it will continue this politics, but of course, as long as the European countries refuse to admit more refugees, then Turkey will have to look after them, and it has no other choice. Turkey believes that while these people are faced with a threat to their life, we cannot close the door and say, it is your country, you stay there, and if you are killed by your authorities, it's up to you. We cannot say. Turkey says that it cannot turn a blind eye to this. But of course, when we turn to the European Union countries, if they do not feel the same way, if they do not want to extend this assistance or goodwill to the Syrian refugees, you cannot force them. It's their country. They may say that I don't want Syrian refugees in my country. Nobody can force them. The European Union action, which is the step which is taken, the initiative which is taken under the guidance of Angela Merkel, was a good start, but certain countries expressed hesitance in endorsing Angela Merkel's proposal. That's to say, they will screen more tightly whomever wants to settle in country A or country B, and they will make their decision or application while they are being kept in Turkey. So in Turkey they will fill a form saying that I would like to settle down in country A in the European Union, in Sweden, in Germany, or in Holland, and this application will be sent to the authorities of these countries. They will screen it, they will examine it. If they decide to receive that particular refugee, this refugee will board a plane and will go to that country. If that country refuses, he is going to remain in Turkey.
Do you find this policy fair?
It's not fair, but I mean, Turkey has decided to follow the open-door policy. It has to suffer the consequences. You cannot force a sovereign country telling him that I admit Syrian refugees, so you have to admit also. If that country, for reasons peculiar to it, doesn't want to admit, you cannot say anything.
After the annexation of Crimea and the whole crisis, there were a lot of discussion about the state of NATO, especially in the Baltic states. Even Poland at some stage was concerned, would really Article 5 would be enforced. Turkey is a NATO member, and bearing in mind what's happening on the eastern border, Syria, Russia, ISIS, everything, do you really believe that Article 5 is there and the NATO is really going to be involved in case things happen?
Article 5, if we read Article 5 very carefully, it says the following. It says, if a NATO country is attacked by a third country, all the other countries will regard this attack as an attack to their country, but the second part of sentence is more important, and they will take all appropriate all measures that they deem appropriate. Many countries will say, I condemn the attack of Russia on the Ukrainian territory, and they say, this is the measure that I deem appropriate. And many countries will do it. Especially the Baltic countries will not go further than this because they are very vulnerable against the Russians. Country like Turkey, at the present juncture, when it is so busy with Syria and it has problem with Russia and also with its own terrorists within Turkey, every day 3 or 4 policemen or 5 or 6 soldiers are killed by the terrorists in Turkey. When Turkey is engaged in such an very important and harsh conditions within its own country, I don't think that it could go very far in sending troops to Ukraine to fight against the Russians.
To be very sure, do you think that NATO today is strong enough?
The merit of NATO's force is that it has never been tested. So I hope that Russia will not go as far as provoke NATO's force to be tested.
We see the more or less everywhere in Europe, in Turkey, kind of the growth of, let's say, conservatism, revanchism in different forms. So how would you explain that, and are you concerned with that? Also with how much role, regarding the whole things which happening with the radicalization of done by ISIS and everything.
Of course, the ISIS type of radicalization should not be tolerated, and no excuse should be sought in order to justify it. It's an outdated approach. It is ferocious. It is every bad thing could be said about it. Radicalization in other countries, yes, in certain European countries, Islamophobia is increasing, and xenophobia also in general, not only against Islam, but in all type of xenophobia is on the rise. In Turkey, there is religiosity is increasing. And I don't know whether you know that I am one of the founding members of the ruling party in Turkey, but I was expelled later on from this party. And I am one of the 6-man committee who drafted the program of the party. In that program, in the year 2001, we avoided any reference to any religious values in the party of the ruling party. So when I was attracted to join the party, it was with this idea that religion in a secular country should be kept for individuals between themselves and their God, and the state should not interfere in it. Now, even if the state does not interfere directly, at least it encourages people to be more religious, and this is not the line that I thought the party was taking at that time, so I do not approve it.
And final, besides Ukraine and Turkey, neighbors, they share the coastline, they're close. There is probably a lot more which could be done for the relation of this country. So, what Turkey is expecting from Ukraine?
Turkey at this stage is aware that it cannot expect much from Ukraine, but cooperation in all areas, economic cooperation within the frame of the Black Sea economic cooperation, which is where Ukraine and Turkey have always been closest members of the Black Sea economic cooperation. And also Turkey, when it solves the domestic problems, Turkey should give a more helping hand in overcoming the difficulties stemming from Russian annexation of Crimea and Russian occupation in certain provinces.
Thank you. Just a couple of minutes more. No, of course, I've read about your recent news, but that would be more inner Turkish news, so as you understand, a lot going on. Inner politics is always...
I'm relieved by being expelled from the party, because the way the party looks at present is not to my liking, so not to be there is better.
But particular things you would probably say that could be done differently?
In Turkey?
Yeah.
Turkey should not get involved to that extent in Syria. It should have managed better its relations with Egypt. It did not need to go that far in its relations with Israel. It should have handled the Iraqi policy differently. All these things could have been done. If I was still foreign minister, well, I am the first foreign minister of this party, so if I was in the cabinet at the time when these policies were designed, I would have chosen a slightly different path.